Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. So here's the funny thing about when songs fall off at the very top of the charts after being up there for a while. It can take a bit of time for everything to just start breaking down and starting to get interesting, or at the very least allow a little bit more instability into the pop charts. And while last week was the one where we got all the big headlines as See You Again took the top, this week is where things started to get a little bit more shaken up. Coupled with the Academy of Country Music having its annual award show, even though really the awards are a complete joke, we got a couple surprises on the charts this week, even if the quality of said surprises kind of remains to be seen. So okay, let's start with our top 10. I have to admit, I am a little bit surprised to see You Again by Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth still at number 1. But you know what? The sales were consistently strong, the streaming and YouTube kept them on top, and even gained impressive airplay. Once the radio picked up on them, they really picked up on them. It did help matters that Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars started to slip into freefall this week, as big hits often do, losing a significant chunk of airplay, streaming, and sales, although not quite enough to drop it further beyond number 2. As I said, it's still got a lot of airplay inertia. At this point, unless See You Again has just a cataclysmic collapse, and I honestly don't see that happening, Uptown Funk shot at that record effectively over at this point. But it's also worth considering that as great as the sales are for See You Again, they won't last forever, which is where Earned It by The Weeknd comes into play, jumping a couple slots to number 3. Now, as much as I can't stand that song, the radio still loves it, which pushed it to nearly top the airplay charts with a fine boost in streaming as well. In this case, it'll be like a serious YouTube or absolutely massive sales that'll keep it from the top, but it was enough to shove Sugar by Maroon 5 back a peg to number 4. Now granted, that might have happened anyways, given that it finally peaked in airplay and began losing a fair amount of sales and streaming. Nothing huge to be mined, but enough to push it back. It also pushed back Trap Queen by Fetty Wap to number 5, although I suspect that pushback will only be temporary, as it still gained in airplay and sales to balance out with its huge streaming. Still nothing really in YouTube, but it is compensating for it, or at least able to. Next up, we got Love Me Like You Do by Ellie Goulding at number 6, which did regain a slot this week, but I'm not exactly sure it's because of that song's strengths or other songs' weaknesses. I mean, it might have gotten a boost in streaming, but airplay and sales are both slipping here against some stronger competition. And it couldn't have hurt that song's chances that Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran had another pretty bad week, dropping across the board, and only thanks to inertia staying at number 7 where it is. Beneath that, Shut Up and Dance by Walk the Moon had another really good week, rising up to number 8 with great sales and still gaining in airplay. It just doesn't quite have the streaming or YouTube to really get to the top, but it is slowly able to compensate for that. And it was also enough to stall out GDFR's Momentum by Flo Rida, Stage Gemini, and Lucas, and push it back to number 9. I mean, it might have had a good week in airplay, but the streaming was kinda iffy, and sales did take a hit this week, especially as Furious 7 hype seems to have finally faded a little bit. And thus, despite having weaker sales and no significant YouTube, the gains in airplay and streaming were enough to push Somebody by Natalie LaRose and Jeremiah back to the top 10 in number 10. Joy. And speaking of songs that just managed to grate on my nerves, let's talk about our losers and dropouts, most of which I don't exactly have any problems with them leaving. I mean, 7-Eleven by Beyonce, Homegrown Honey by Darius Rucker, no issues whatsoever with them leaving the charts. And while I've softened a little bit on I Don't Fuck With You by Big Sean and E40, it's still too inconsistent and grating to make me sad that it's gone now. Beyond that, our losers are generally a pretty mixed bag. I mean, I'm not exactly distressed that god-awful songs like Feelin' Myself by Nicki Minaj and Beyonce, or Ain't Worth the Whiskey by Cole Swindle took hits to 95 and 65 respectively. And Lonely Eyes by Chris Young is on its way out naturally, dropping into 78. Will probably be gone in a few weeks. Beyond that, well, a Heartbeat song by Kelly Clarkson continues to underwhelm everybody at 44. Legend by Drake slips to 90 on an already overlong chart run. Seriously, get rid of this song. And Get Low by Dylan Francis and DJ Snake, and that posse cut Ride Out fell to 74 and 84 respectively, thanks again to Furious 7 losing even more of its hype. The one track that I am disappointed to see slip back a little bit was King Kunta by Kendrick Lamar, dropping to 68. But then again, I'm not exactly surprised it lost slots anyway. If the radio isn't grabbing onto it by now, or a lot of streaming, and it really needs to be added to more formats to see it pick up steam, and that's not really happening, then this being the mainstream smash that it could have been, it'll be unlikely. I'm sorry. Now, our gains actually seem to be a little bit better this week, or at least easier to explain. Of course, the big gain for everybody came with I Really Like You You by Carly Rae Jepsen going to 39, because everyone's least favorite Canadian, Justin Bieber, seems to be trying his damnedest to make this song go viral, just like it did with Call Me Maybe. And while YouTube hasn't quite latched onto it in the same way, it re-entered the streaming charts mostly thanks to his maddening ability to lodge itself in your head and never go away. It's just a damn shame that the song isn't written better, because that retro 80s sensibility, it works decently for the rest of the song. Believe it or not, I kinda wanted to like it more than I do. And as for the rest of the gains, DJ Snake continues on his chart ascendance on both Lean On with Major Lazer and Mia at 87, and you know you like it with the Luna George at 55. And David Guetta's rising the meteoric success of Hey Mama with Nicki Minaj and Afrojack at 27, which seems destined to be a top 10 hit the way it's selling. But of course, the big news came from our country gains. Of course, Girl Crush rose to number 25 after the ACM Awards and all of that stupid controversy, but Wild Child by Kenny Chesney and Grace Potter also got a welcome boost to 73. The real surprise for me here was She Don't Love You by Eric Posley suddenly gaining some traction to go up to 79. I mean, I know better than to think it would be a real hit, no matter how amazing the song is, and it is really damn good, but I can at least hope and I can at least pray that it gets better. And on the topic of the ACM Awards, let's take a look at our one returning entry, shall we?
Monday through Friday, man, we bust our backs. Well, if you're one of us, raise your glass. Well, I belong to the drinking class.
Look, this song owes its chart return and its highest charting spot to date to Lee Brice's performance. But even with that, I'm really struggling to care. I gotta be honest here, I didn't cover Lee Brice's most recent album, I Don't Dance, last year because as a country singer and a writer, he doesn't interest me all that much. I mean, you gotta start writing songs for other country artists, and most of them, like Crazy Girl by the Eli Young Band, they tended not to be all that interesting. Or good. And thus, there's a certain twisted irony that he didn't write Drinking Class, and it's probably one of the few Lee Brice songs I actually like. Mostly because he's a great singer with a ton of raw, authentic power, and he does have a taste for anthemic swell that does work well with very populous anthems like this. I do feel that the mixing on this track is a little bit too slick for my taste, though. And that injection of steel guitar near the end of the song, it's good, but it doesn't quite flow as well as it should. But you know what, otherwise? Track's fine enough. Can't really complain. Well, that was fairly easy. Now on to the rest of our songs, starting with number 100, House of the Rising Sun by Kimberley Nichole.
They call the rising sun, and it's been a ruin for many a poor boy. And God, I know I'm one.
Hey look everyone, The Voice is back on television, and that means that nearly every week we're going to be getting more songs than usual from everyone's favorite music talent show. I mean, we all remember that country guy who won last year that I even covered multiple times on this show. No, seriously, I'm not being sarcastic here, I don't remember him. And to some extent, that's the problem. Say what you will about American Idol, at least it turned some of its winners into real stars like Carrie Underwood or Kelly Clarkson, if only just for a short time, like say like Philip Phillips. The Voice, on the other hand, has only had real success in boosting the success and prosperity of its host, as we'll discuss that in a couple minutes. So in this case, we've got to cover the massive hit from the Animals, House of the Rising Sun by Kimberley Nichole, reinterpreted as an eerie, soulful gospel number that's honestly got some pretty impressive low guitar sizzle. It sounds pretty damn great. If The Voice is doing something right here, it looks like they took a cue from Hozier's most recent album and bringing together as much grit as he possibly can in this kind of track as they could get for a live performance. And Kimberley's fiery rawness is a great fit for it. Now let's make this clear, the original is to some extent kind of untouchable, mostly thanks to a killer guitar melody and that early psychedelic organ progression that this version can't quite emphasize as well. But you know what, still, Kimberley Nichole is a real find, a real talent, and probably the only time I'll hear her is when I do Billboard Breakdown, so with that, I'm looking forward to more from her. Great job! Number 99, Renegades by Ex-Ambassadors. So okay, here's the frustrating thing about the Billboard charts, one of many. They ultimately reflect what gets popular in America, and let's be honest, the mass public doesn't really tend to care where the music comes from so long as it's good. And since so many companies license music from artists for commercials, it can sometimes lead to a breakthrough on the charts. The funny thing is that when this starts to happen more than once, which takes us to X-Ambassadors, who originally lodged a very low charting hit last year with Jungle thanks to a whole load of promotional material, from the WWE to Battlefield Hardline to a slew of TV shows. And Renegades, it owes its success to being featured in ads for the new Jeep Renegade. But you know what? That being said, I do think this song might have some real staying power, if only to serve as a replacement for Mumford & Sons' overly slick redesign. I mean, sure, X-Ambassadors do use some synthesizers as well, and the acoustic grooves are nowhere near as potent as Mumford & Sons at their best, but the stomping percussion, the choral vocals, and that anthemic presentation actually leads to a pretty solid song. Of course, there's a certain irony to a song about living like we're renegades licensed for car commercials, but you know what? It doesn't make the original song any less good, and you know what? I can take this pretty well. Number 98, Imagine by Sawyer Fredericks.
Living for today, you. Imagine there's no country.
See, this is the sort of cover from The Voice that just annoys the piss out of me. Not only does it completely remove the rich piano line that was the backbone of John Lennon's song, but instead replaces it with a formless guitar line and a singer who plays the song with so much overwrought, tremulous presence that it just becomes hard to notice how much he can't quite hit all those high notes. It doesn't help matters that I'm not the biggest fan of Imagine as a song anyways. I know it's sacrilegious, but forget the Beatles. When John Lennon wrote songs like Instant Karma and Working Class Hero on his own, Imagine can kind of feel a little bit underwhelming and saccharine and boring. But you know what? This version tries to translate that elegance of the song and just completely ruins it. It really sucks. Definitely not a fan. Next, number 96, Be Real by Kid Ink featuring Dej Loaf.
You ain't got no bottle. Let's just be honest. Let's just be real. You ain't got no cash. You ain't got no dollars. They stay with that drama. Let's just be real.
Now before we get to Kid Ink, I've been asked in the past to give my opinion on Dej Loaf a couple times. So here it is. I don't get the appeal. I mean, she sounds quite literally like a little kid. And while some of the huskier edges in her voice aren't bad, I find it hard to treat her as much of a presence on these songs, especially on the icy DJ Mustard produced tracks like this with the twinkling keyboards and that thick low synth line. Granted, I prefer her over the pitch shifted tone over the verses, but it's a mid-album cut produced by DJ Mustard. You can't exactly expect a lot of quality here. As for Kid Ink, look, for as much as I've defended this guy in the past for having a solid flow with the occasional good line, it's rare that he rise above competent off of his last album, Full Speed. This is one of the songs on that record that barely reaches that point. I mean, at least tracks like Faster had some interesting guitar and percussion interplay, and what it feels like was biting from Kanye's style in a way that was at least interesting. But this, it's not interesting. Next, number 93, Sangria by Blake Shelton.
Your skin is begging to be kissed by a little more than the sun. You take my hand in yours, you lean in and your lips taste like sangria. Your lips taste like sangria.
So as I said, the true success stories from The Voice have really been the invigorated careers of the judges, and nobody has been more successful in this vein, as I've said in the past, than Blake Shelton, who rode the bro country wave at precisely the right time to huge success, a real comeback, and then promptly tried to transition back to his usual brand of country music with Bringing Back the Sunshine last year when bro country flamed out. And I'll be blunt, I was probably too easy on that record, because the majority of it sucked. And this song, okay, well, there was worse on the album, but this song is not exactly one of the great songs. As a track, it tries to go for this slightly washed out, steel guitar touch, adult contemporary country sex song, and as a whole, I'm just left kind of ambivalent to it. I'm not saying that country in this vein can't be sexy. I think they can pull it off, but Blake Shelton doesn't have the subtlety in his vocals to do this well. And considering the song is more about that whirling, heady feeling getting drunk on sangria, it's odd how stilted that chorus feels, not quite flowing as well as it should, and I think it comes on with that last note. As a song, this feels a little bit off to me. Not precisely bad, but nothing I'd go back to either. Number 91, American Oxygen by Rihanna.
American oxygen, whoa, pressure.
So okay, I think at this point everybody should be able to admit that Jay-Z's big Tidal experiment was a colossal fuck up in terms of marketing and execution. Putting aside the terrible optics of trying to produce an artist-focused streaming platform by shoving a collection of multi-millionaires to the front edge instead of any, indie artists. Putting aside all the fact that nobody asides audiophiles like myself care all that much about high-fidelity music or can even really tell the difference, because most can't. Putting aside the fact that Tidal has a much higher drain on one's data package than Spotify does. Putting aside the fact that the exclusive releases on Tidal puts out an attitude of elitism that most of the public will ignore anyways unless they're hardcore fans, and they'll be buying that on iTunes anyways. At this point, the market responded and Tidal has pretty much plummeted off of the app charts and everybody's trying to distance himself from it. So in a move that shocked precisely nobody, certain songs initially packaged as Tidal exclusives eventually landed on YouTube anyway. So now we've got American Oxygen by Rihanna. Now, after Bitch Better Have My Money, anything would have been a step up and improvement. And this is, but you know what, the more I listened through the song, the more I realized I had no idea what the song was trying to do. Lyrically, it's pretty straightforwardly patriotic, implying people will say or do anything to achieve that great American dream. But then you have the minor keys and the tone of the track is much heavier, imply a much bleaker future, where said dream might backfire and not be all that it's cracked up to be, even if you are sucking in all that American oxygen. Now, some of you will say, well, no wonder the song isn't resonating with you that strongly, you're Canadian. And yeah, that is true, but I'm pretty damn patriotic when I want to be. And going past that to a production standpoint, this track doesn't exactly do it for me. The smudged out dirge-like piano's melody, that's fine enough, but Alex the Kid's production with the clattering percussion, twisted swirl of mid-ranged warped rattling, and that pummeling low-end bass completely overtakes the melody on the song, makes it feel lumbering and overweight. So yeah, if you want to call that American, yeah, okay, you guys can have it, but not for me. Number 80, Fight Song by Rachel Platten.
I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes. 'Cause I've still got a lot of fight left in me.
So okay, do any of you guys remember that D12 track Fight Music? Hell, do you guys even remember D12, Eminem's old rap posse that dropped 2 incredibly uneven albums that really haven't held up all that well in retrospect? Well, for as nasty and ridiculous as Fight Music was, although seriously, that howling guitar and strings was actually pretty awesome, it was a track you can imagine as a soundtrack to an actual fight, an actual brawl. Fight Song by Rachel Platten, on the other hand, is a Kelly Clarkson-esque self-esteem anthem that actually does bring some real punch with the drums and Platten's energy and some decent charisma, but it's nothing close to a legit fight song. I'm sorry. But okay, putting aside that particular nitpick, there's honestly very little I can say about this track. I mean, sure, the guitars have some texture when you can actually hear them, but it's not as if I haven't heard a dozen variants of this sort of anthem by every American Idol winner or wannabe, especially lyrically, where her sentiment that nobody believes in her is a little bit undercut when in her second verse implies that people are concerned about her. And once again, emphasizing percussion over melody means that this track just does not stick in my memory whatsoever. Not exactly a bad song, it's fine enough, but it's far from a great one. Sorry. And finally, number 43, Nasty Freestyle by T. Wayne.
That ass don't sit like a horse. I be ballin' on these niggas, got me feeling like sports. Dash got so much wood, I could build me a fort. Ain't too many things I ain't done yet. I'm the king of this shit, crowned by the toilet.
I think I can say this definitively. One of the worst things to ever happen to mainstream hip-hop is Vine. Last year might have been when it all started, but throughout 2015, it has kept happening that songs from Vine have become hits, which is probably why only those who listen to the radio give me these confused looks whenever I say that hip-hop has been goddamn great this year. Kendrick Lamar, Lupe Fiasco, Doomtree, Joey Badass, Ludacris, Yellow Wolf, it's been excellent this year, and yet you'd never know because in this case, we got somebody like T. Wayne, a producer and MC who's been around the edges of the mainstream for a while now, and from what I can kind of tell from his YouTube channel, he's sort of affiliated with Waka Flocka Flame, and he's been releasing mixtapes and dance videos for years now. And now, since he's had some scattered success, Nasty Freestyle is his first real breakout hit. And man, it's lousy. The best thing I can say for it, there's some kind of snippets of wit, then half that are cribbed from Lil Wayne's Leftovers that are just a bad toilet reference, and half of these lines are just asinine. And I'm sorry, but a poor poor man's T.I. impression with his flow, a meandering piano line, a minimalist trap beat that I've heard a dozen times before, and a terrible oily synth line that just puts my hair on end does not impress me whatsoever. In other words, while you may have been trying to follow in the footsteps of Fetty Wap's Trap Queen, the difference in that track at least had a lightness of tone and pretty decent production, whereas this is just a mess and a forgettable one at that. Skip it. So yeah, that was our week, and wow, not a lot of good material this week, but not really a lot of really standout crap either. For the best, you know what, I'm gonna give it to Kimberley and Nichole's genuinely potent cover of House of the Rising Sun. I want to hear more from her, with Renegades by X-Ambassadors getting that honorable mention. For the worst, yeah, it's a little bit trickier, but I'm giving the worst to Sawyer Fredericks' terrible cover of Imagine, and the dishonorable mention to Nasty Freestyle by T-Wayne. Let's hope that next week actually gives me something more to talk about beyond our couple surprises here. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.